Voting isn't just going to the polls anymore on Election Day. Options like early voting, mail-in voting, and ballot drop boxes are available to more voters and are growing in popularity. How to Vote is a tool created by Democracy Works, and it breaks down the options your state offers by forecasting a ballot, empowering you to decide where and when to vote. Democracy works best when we all vote, but misinformation and confusion about election procedures have resulted in low voter turnout. How to Vote takes the guesswork out of the voting process. It is easy to use and helps folks from all over the country overcome many of the process barriers to voting. It is committed to helping you vote no matter what. You can use the How to Vote tool to sign up for election reminders, see what's on your ballot, get step-by-step assistance requesting your mail ballot, explore your options for returning your mail-in ballot, check your voter registration status, and find your local polling site, and make sure that you have an appropriate ID to bring with you. Decide when and where you'll vote this year at howto.vote.
Hello and welcome to the formal review. Today, we will be looking at the 2018 film, Mary Poppins Returns. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the review.
Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 27 of the formal review. Now before I get started, I do want to, as always, reiterate there may be some spoilers, but I always try to keep everything vague so not to ruin the movie for you. But if you really don't care about that, just keep listening. So Mary Poppins Returns is a musical fantasy film directed by Rob Marshall and written by David McGee. It is based on the book series Mary Poppins by P.L. Travers, and it is the sequel to the 1964 film Mary Poppins. It stars Emily Blunt, Lin-Manuel Miranda, Ben Winshaw, Emily Mortimer, Julie Walters, Dick Van Dyke, Angela Lansbury, Colin Firth, and Meryl Streep. The film takes place 25 years after the events of the original film, when Mary Poppins, played by Blunt, returns to help the Banks children, played by Winshaw and Mortimer, and Michael Banks' children. Now, given that this is one of the longest sequels ever to be made, going into this, I had a lot of hesitation. For those who don't know my thoughts on the original film, please go check that out on Box Office Buzz. But in short, I really enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite childhood films. You have the time between these two films, but also the replacing of Julie Andrews as Mary Poppins. Emily Blunt has done, obviously, a few musicals in the past, and she is a great actress, so I was open-minded to it. But this film had a lot to live up to. This film is set in the 1930s. Michael and Jane Banks are now adults. Michael is a widowed father of 3, and the bank where his father used to work at is now about to repress their home. So the story here is fairly along the lines of the original film, where the father figure is not able to realize what is important and in front of him. But where I think Marshall takes this film into a new realm is taking the themes that were in the original and adding a new message of how to move on from, which is a very intense message to teach the children, because as a parent, when discussing what death means to young children, it can be a very hard conversation to have. And this film takes that discussion and makes it honestly a little bit more family friendly. So one thing about the original film is when it comes to who Mary Poppins is, I mean, there's been a lot of fan theories of, is she honestly magical, or is it nonsense, or does she makes things more interesting to children? The imagination of children has been known to be one of the most extremely elaborate imaginations. Create these scenarios with these 2 or 3 toys, and you create this entire battle scene in your head. Now, this is something that Mary Poppins essentially taps into when it comes to imagination. In the original film, they hop into a chalk picture and go on a journey in the countryside. Now, a logical person can look at this and say, of course that didn't happen. But what's the problem with having a child imagine that? But the question is that, is Mary Poppins magical? And if she is, why don't the adults remember it? Now, this is an interesting comment on the fact that as an adult, and you kind of lose track of that imagination that you have as a kid. When you grow older, your imagination isn't as elaborate anymore because you're focused on caring for your children while also balancing your career, while also balancing your marriage. There's a lot of other things going on. So having the time to turn around and look at what matters in life and look at the simple thing. One could say that she is magical. but one could also say that she's not. But she essentially is making these situations more fun. These children, when they're brought in, they view it taking a bath is just something they do every day. But Mary Poppins turns that into swimming through an ocean, finding buried treasure. This is something that you're not going to think of as an adult. And these kids aren't thinking of it in this film. So she makes that happen. And when children have to deal with very serious issues, what do adults try to do? They try to make it not as dark as it could be, because it sometimes can be a sad situation. Look at how Mrs. Doubtfire deals with divorce. It's a very hard situation that two parents have to go through. But at the end of that film, it obviously ends on a relatively happy note in that they are willing to accept the fact that their family is not always going to be together, but that doesn't make them any less of a family. And so we can honestly, as this film says, there's only a way to go but up. You can look at something from a different point of view, but that doesn't mean things have changed. That message is extremely well addressed in this film through the overall story, but also through the songs, because I think that's one thing about this film that has a lot of great songs, and that if you look at, for example, The Place Where the Lost Things Go, it's a song that's basing about things have just moved from one place to another. Now, that doesn't mean that they're gone forever, but maybe we have to look for them in a different way. Because in this film, Michael has lost his wife, and while we don't know very much about her, you know that she was a lovely person. And this is a very heartful grieving period. One, from a widower's perspective, and also the children's perspective. Michael has to keep himself extremely stern with these children, because otherwise he's going to be breaking down in front of them. His children can't see that, because they have to see that everything is okay. There's a song that says that nothing's gone forever, only out of sight. When it comes to addressing the topic of death, whether you lose a very close family member or a pet, the memories of the person or pet are still around. They're not gone forever. And this is a really intense concept to teach young children, but it is still simple, and it's something that obviously adults struggle with as well. And for a film that is really trying to wrap their audience's head around grief and loss, just taking children in situations like this and telling them these messages and helping them move on and be the positive aspect that they really are. When you're in times of sadness, is that look at it from a different point of view. Turning Turk. She was looking at the second Wednesday of each month being this really bad scenario that basically turns her on her head. But then Mary Poppins comes in and tells her, well, yes, that happens, but what happens if you look at it from this point of view? You're seeing a world in a whole new way that only you get to see every second Wednesday. This is something that you won't see any other day of the month. And it turned a tragedy that she looks at it into a blessing. And this is a message that I think is really done well through the music, through the plot, and the writing is done extremely well. And that is extremely supported by the fantastic cast. Emily Blunt is phenomenal in this role. She brings this vain yet fun character that, similar to the original film, touches on the inequalities of the time, and honestly today as well, of women versus men. But she does it with her own pizzazz. While she's not, in my personal opinion, going to replace Julie Andrews, but for that extremely uphill battle that she had to climb against, she does everything that she can possibly do perfect in every way. There really isn't much more that she could do, because she plays this character absolutely brilliantly. Lin-Manuel Miranda is a lot of fun. He is this movie's Bert. He has that awful Cockney accent. I liked his character, and I thought it was a fun connection to the old film. Ben Whishaw did a decent job. Emily Mortimer, I thought she was seeing Julie Walters in pretty much anything is a lot of fun. Same with Angela Lansbury. Meryl Streep, I think for the one scene that she's in this film, she's great. And Dick Van Dyke, what can you say about the man? He is 90 plus and he's dancing on a desk. This is a man that you can't really take much away from. The performances, I think, are all fantastic in this film. Now, one of my flaws with this film is that I do think that it does copy a lot of the arcs of the original film. It's definitely pulling out a lot of aspects similar to that of The Force Awakens. There are a lot of similarities. Even the songs are fairly similar works. Now, that doesn't mean that they're bad songs. It just means that you can essentially say, oh, that was this film's version of this song. And one other flaw, I feel that when it came to Jane Banks, her character, I feel there wasn't much for her to do in this story because she wasn't really doing much. She ended up just being a very similar character to the mom in the first film. So much so that her character essentially followed in her footsteps, which is great and makes sense. However, just from a story standpoint, she didn't really do much in the story. At the end of the day, I really love that this film touched on these strong messages because that's what really makes this film actually really... This is a kid's film at the end of the day. Yeah, there's a lot of copies, things, but this message, I think, is what makes it a really strong film. And honestly, a fairly successful sequel, even though it does copy a bunch of the same plot points. You don't have to go see this film while watching the original first. Obviously, that does help, and there are certain things that you can pick up on that were in the original film. However, it's not a necessity, and that's what I think makes a very successful sequel, is that you can watch this film, understand exactly where everything is, and continue on from there, get who these characters are, and understand what's going on. Emily Blunt is worth the ticket by herself, and that's a lot to say about a film that has had such an iconic point of view. And I can't wait to watch this film again, either in theaters or on Blu-ray. And I would rate this film a 4.5 out of 5 bow ties. Now my question for you is, what did you think of the film? Do you think it worked well as a sequel, or do you think it was just too much of a copy? Let me know. Hit me up on social media. The URL's all the same. It's at The Formal Review. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I also do written reviews and retrospective reviews on Box Office Buzz. Go check them out. They offer everything from movie news to information about TV shows, video games, music, everything. You can find it there. Go check them out. And I do want to thank everyone for tuning in once again. I really appreciate everyone listening every single episode. And furthermore, I want to thank those who have been supportive on a financial nature. If you haven't started supporting, go check out anchor.com/the-formal-review and click support this podcast. So you never miss an episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcasting service, whether that's iTunes, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and feel free to write a review. I'm always looking to grow as a reviewer. Now, as with all reviews, there's music in the background, and I do this just to bring attention to the fact that the music is a part of the film and really can bring you into the film's atmosphere. So the music in the background on this episode is from the Mary Poppins Returns original motion picture soundtrack, composed by Mark Shaiman and was released by Walt Disney Records on December 7th, 2018. Till next time, I'll see you at the movies. Take care, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Formal Review. We hope you'll join us again.